Hey, hi, hello everyone, welcome or welcome back to this channel. A little bit late, I know. Time just keeps flying by and I just needed to stop. I needed to stop immediately because what the fuck? Today I bring you my favorite books of 2023. I think I only picked 8 to talk about out of all of the books that I have as favorites. And if you want to go see my full and complete list and the honorable mentions, it'll be on my Instagram. I'll put a link down below. Anyways, now that we've gotten that out of the way, without further ado, let's get started. I'm gonna start from my top 3 and then the rest aren't really in order. Number 1 is Penance by Eliza Clark. I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. Actually 10 out of 10. A 20 out of 10. 100 out of 10 stars. It was that fucking good. This was by far the most interesting and intricate book that I read last year. From the storyline down to the structure of the book, the sheer amount of details in this is delectable. Gillian Flynn has been my favorite thriller author maybe since 2019, and Eliza Clark is a very, very close second. And speaking of Gillian Flynn, this did remind me of Dark Places by Gillian Flynn, both in the atmosphere, but also in the way that I was stalling and putting it off just because of how ugly it was, and I just didn't want to know. I didn't want to know what's gonna happen. And it had me scared, not in the like jump scare kind of way, but I was scared because I already knew what was coming, so it was very dreadful and daunting. So I did the same thing that I did with Dark Places when I was reading this. I literally put off reading this just because I was like, I don't want to read this. I don't want to know because I know it's going to be bad. But I was also stalling and putting this book off because I didn't want it to end. That's how much I enjoyed it. This literally took me like a month to read, and that was purposeful because I really wanted to take my time with this, even though again, it's not a pretty story. Aside from the fact that both of these books start out letting us know that somebody was murdered, and it's basically a recount of the how and the why, and in Dark Places' case, also the who, these books take a very different approach because they're not the same story. But if you liked Dark Places by Gillian Flynn, you might also like Penance. There is a lot of Tumblr lore in this, and you can just tell this is someone who's been on Tumblr. And the reason that I know she either was or is on Tumblr is because I am on Tumblr. I've had my blog since 2011, so I know a Tumblr girl when I see one. The portrayal of certain people on that website is so accurate that it made me cringe and itch when I was reading through it. I think Eliza Clark excels at character studies, excels at dissecting a character without spoon-feeding you and spelling out information on their disposition. She gives you facts about a character, whether good or bad, and really expands on those, gives the character so much nuance. You hate them, you get them. You empathize, but also despise them. It's just a mixture of so many emotions that she's able to evoke out of the reader, at least in my case. In the end though, you just know her characters are simply just terrible people with incredibly complex characterization. Her characters feel so real and human, and I think that's the scariest part of her writing, because it's contemporary. Next up we have You Exist Too Much by Zaina Arafat. Our mutual sacrifice creates wounds that may never heal. I will carry sadness for her pain and also for mine. 5 out of 5 fucking stars. This book completely took me by surprise. This was the last book I think I read in the year, and I did not expect it to be this much of a banger. Literally 5 out of 5 stars. How do I even begin describing this? Double whammy, cause this bitch got both mommy and daddy issues. Her life is a fucking mess. You Exist Too Much is about a self-destructive Palestinian bisexual woman with a very complex, tumultuous, and discordant relationship with her mother, her land, her family, and her sexuality. So the main character of this book is a train wreck. I think I already covered that. She has a really sad and depressing life, but you know, most of it is self-inflicted. And at first, when you start reading, you're kind of indifferent to how bad her life is because, again, it is kind of her fault that she's in this predicament, in this cycle. But as you get to know her, her upbringing, and seeing the relationship with her mother, you really start to empathize and seeing yourself in her, and also genuinely wanting her to make healthier choices. One thing I really loved about this book is how seamlessly Palestinian history is woven throughout the storyline. Both the main history of Palestine, but also her own history with the country, as well as her family residing there. This brings me to my next book and the end of my top 3, Big Swiss by Jen Began. You Exist Too Much was very reminiscent of Big Swiss because, again, this also deals with a queer woman's mommy issues. I think she has a lot more issues than that, but mainly her being neglected in her childhood and not really ever growing up. I've talked about this extensively, I'm pretty sure, throughout my videos, but I also did talk about it in my reviewing the first 50 books that I read last year, so if you want to go check that out, I'll link it down below. I won't spend too much time on this, but if you didn't know, this is about Greta, a 40-something-year-old woman who is a transcriber for the sex therapist, and through transcribing those sessions, she becomes fixated on one of the therapist's clients, who happens to be a 28-year-old married woman who's never had an orgasm, hence her seeing the sex therapist. And this is essentially about Greta and this woman having the grossest, strangest, crudest affair. I loved it immensely. I really enjoyed it. If you didn't know by the 100 times that I've mentioned this book, the reason I described this in one of my videos as mommy issues but in reverse is because in this one, the age gap is kind of flipped. The person in the mommy role is usually older, but this time we have a 28-year-old in that role with a 40-something looking up. I think something that I resonated a lot with in this is the fact that Greta still feels and acts like a child. Not in any particular way, but seeing this woman in her late 20s seem so grown up and having her life together, I think this is something that Greta admires and is intimidated by, but also would kind of want for herself as well. She just doesn't really know how to get there, especially not at her big age, which is also why I think their dynamic is so interesting, because Big Swiss is like the complete polar opposite of Greta. This book can be described in one TikTok audio, which I'm gonna play right now.
A day in the life of a stay-at-home, burned-out, degenerate college student with no friends, no money, no job, no motivation, no social life, no relationship, no love life, no personality, no bitches. No words, no skills, no sense of direction, no driver's license, nowhere to go, no money, no bodies, no desire to do anything. Bone dry DMs, anxiety, dry humor, overshare, daddy issues, mommy issues, people issues, TikTok addiction, no perception of reality, antisocial, no savings, no backup plan, no patience, no talent, sleeps with her mom, lazy AF, broke AF.
Yeah, Greta doesn't really have much going for her. And I love a train wreck main character, if you haven't noticed. Like, I love me a train wreck. So, Big Swiss. I think I gave this a 4.25 out of 5 stars. Now on to the rest of the books that aren't really in any particular order. The first one is The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. I gave this one a 5 out of 5 stars. Did I? 4.75? Whichever. This is such an out there concept, but executed in a really creative and masterful way. The slow and deliberate start, the build up to uncover the mystery is just chef's kiss. Okay, I loved how this incorporated so many things that I love to read about, such as misogyny, misogynoir, racism, hysteria. A lot of people had issues with how historically inaccurate this was in terms of the women's role within their household and with their husbands, but I don't really think it matters because none of what happens to these women in this, I think this is set in the 90s or the 80s or something, but none of what happens to these women is exclusive to a certain point in time in history where you can pinpoint that this is something that happened and then it's never happened again. You know what I mean? So I feel like it's a really moot point because this shit still happens to this day. So I don't understand why this would be historically inaccurate. You know what I mean? Like, these are things that still happen to this day. Maybe they happen in a different way or whatever, but it still happens, guys. So I don't really think that's a fair critique of this book, especially when there's more pressing matters to address. Which brings me to my next point, my two biggest qualms with this book. The first one is how excessive the nudity was, especially with the descriptions, especially for the female characters, whether they were children, middle-aged, or elderly. The descriptions were just way too excessive, and I don't think they were very necessary. I let it slide because it reflected the grotesque atmosphere of the story and also of the villain, but still, there were a lot of details in there that didn't need to be. My other one is the fact that the main character's son gradually becomes more obsessed with Hitler and Nazis as the book progresses, and it's just never taken as seriously as it needs to, not by the parents nor the storyline, so I thought that was a bit weird. So yeah, a little side-eye for that. So these were my two biggest qualms. Aside from that, no notes. The structure, the pacing, the intrigue, the fact that the intrigue was maintained even after the reveal, the setting and characterization came together so well. This is so compelling. Also, one of the best audiobooks that I've ever listened to. Bonnie Turpin was acting down. Like, it was so serious for them. Next up, we have The Push by Ashley Audrain. I read this in the beginning of the year and it still stuck with me. I think I gave gave this a 5 out of 5. One question that I constantly ask myself when it comes to tumultuous and dysfunctional mother-daughter relationships is akin to the chicken and the egg. Which came first? I'll just read you my notes on this because this was literally like a brain dump, so I'll just read it. Is the child born evil for real, or does she just sense the resentment from mom? Is the attitude from the child due to mom's resentment? Did mom's resentment start in the womb or after birth? What is the correlation? What is the causation? Is it simultaneous? Is it a push and pull or a domino effect? Like, what is it? You know what I mean? We've all heard of boy moms and girl dads and moms being jealous of their daughters and essentially thinking that they're in competition with their daughters while also simultaneously coddling their boys, saying shit like, I'm the first woman in his life or whatever the fuck. I want to know the psychology behind that. Like, Freud, this is all your fault. Like, you need to wake up and answer the phone now. I need some answers. What is it? What is it? What's happening? Anyways, this is not a research paper, but this is what was going through my head while I was reading this book. This was a really thought-provoking read. It also made me really fucking angry. At the end of it, I wanted to shoot somebody, a specific somebody. House of Hunger by Alexis Henderson. I gave this a 3.75 out of 5 stars. This is about Marion Shaw, a young woman raised in the slums seeing no escape for this life of misery that she longs to leave behind until she stumbles across a listing seeking a blood maid. I'll let you find out the rest. Now, I rated this a 3.75 out of 5 stars, and this is the second time that a book rated less than a 4 has made it onto my list of favorites of the year. Let me explain. It's only a 3.75 because the story just took too long to establish a dynamic between Marion and the love interest. They barely had any interactions for a good third of the book, and I think that is the biggest downfall for this book. Notice how, I don't know if you can see that, but I've tabbed, it's upside down. I've tabbed the book, and notice how the tabs only start about a third of the way through. This much is the only part that's tabbed in this book. And then we have the beginning, which is this much. Don't get me wrong, the writing is gorgeous, and I really enjoyed how Alexis Henderson really took the time to set the story, set the atmosphere, and really give us an idea of what Marion's life was before the listing. But it just takes too long, you know, it overstays its welcome. I feel like at some point, the exposition of the world and of Marion's life, even after she's accepted, it takes the front seat, which isn't really an issue. Like, some people might like that, honestly, because the story really is about Marion. But I just feel like I wanted a little bit more time with the love interest to establish a good dynamic, especially because certain things that happened and that were being said towards the end, I didn't really feel like they were earned because we didn't have time to really flesh out those feelings. The last half of this book, if a little bit rushed, is where it gathers itself and really brings it in and delivers. The last half is what made me realize that there was something missing in the beginning. I mean, obviously I knew there was something missing because I kept reading and I was like, when are we gonna meet this person? You know, which, like, that's the main point. She's going to be a blood maid for this countess, and we haven't even met the countess yet, aside from one scene, which is the initial scene, and then we don't really see her again for quite some time. But yes, the last half is what made me realize that there was really a lot of wasted potential for an all-consuming and really intense love story, but we didn't really get there because we didn't spend enough time establishing a dynamic for these two. I think a movie of this could be so good. Think Saltburn meets Interview with the Vampire, the TV show. Saltburn in terms of visuals and atmosphere, and Interview with the Vampire in terms of servitude and essentially having a master slash maker. Do you see the vision? Do you see the vision? Because I see it. If anybody wants to hit me up, like, we can make this happen. Who wants me to direct this? Because I will. I have a vision. I have a vision for this. The main reason why this is not a 4 is because I don't think we went as far as we could have. Could have been creepier, sexier, more intense, and honestly, the ending is really what brought this together for me, and just the immense potential that it had. I did enjoy this. This is a very short book. It's barely 300 pages. It's like 280 something pages. So I do forgive it, especially because I don't feel like it wasted my time. If it had been a little bit longer, maybe. Actually, it didn't even need to be longer. Again, if the exposition in the beginning was just cut short a little bit, we could have really had 4 stars in our hands. But I did enjoy it for the most most part. Obviously, it is on this list. I also bought it before I read it, and I don't regret buying it, so that says a lot. I do think it was worth it. I just feel like there was some potential wasted. Our last and final book is gonna be The Gentleman's Guide to Slaying Vampires. Wait, no. Why are there so many guides? Our last and final book is The Gentleman's Guide to Vice. Yeah, it's coming. It's coming. It's coming back. The last and final book on my list of favorites is actually 3 books, the first 2 books in the Montague Siblings trilogy, as well as the novella of the first book, but I'll just focus on the first book, The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue. I gave this a 4.5 out of 5 stars, I'm pretty sure. Monty is my high maintenance bisexual princess. When I first started this, I did not vibe with him or the story. He was like this rich, entitled white boy complaining about being rich and entitled, but I decided to reserve judgment and keep reading, and guess what? Monty is still an entitled little shit, but he's also so much more. He's stubborn, lazy, dramatic. You know, now that I think of it, he kind of reminds me of Howl from Howl's Moving Castle. Yeah, picture Howl when you picture Monty. Stubborn, lazy, dramatic, but also very loyal and goofy, but not in the like funny hee hee ha ha way, but in the like, oh my god, you're so embarrassing. How did you not just die of embarrassment? But it's very endearing, especially because you just can tell he's got a lot of heart. You know, his heart is in the right place. My favorite thing about these books is the sibling dynamic between Monty and Felicity. Their back and forth and their banter is unmatched, especially because Monty is always coming at Felicity unprovoked and insulting her, and Felicity just really gathers him so quick. Like, she is so quick-witted. It's just really funny to witness, and I eat it up every single time. Obviously, The Lady's Guide to Petticoats and Piracy follows Felicity, and it is just as fun as the first book following Monty. So those were my top books of 2023, and I'll briefly list out some honorable mentions. Monday's Not Coming by Tiffany D. Jackson, Wash Day Diaries by Jamila Rouser and Robin Smith, Genderqueer by Maya Kobabe, and finally, The Four Winds by Kristen Hanna. I do want to read more of Kristen Hanna's works. Even though this was my first book of hers, I think she has a really good grasp of writing as a craft, and I really want to get more into her writing. That is it for this video. Please let me know some of your favorite books of 2023. Let me know if we have books in common, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye!